And one of my favorite dudes, you know, on this earth is my enemy. Like that, one of those guys, one of the best guys that I've met in my whole life, he happens to be my enemy. And that's just reality. That's just reality. I understand the whole dynamics. Like that's, you grow up in the gang culture, that's the enemy. There's no turning from that. It's not as easy as it seems that you could just stop that. So I understand all that, you know, but if you have the opportunity, if you have a chance, and you could still be from your neighborhood, you know, you could still do you know, you could still do good. Look out for your homies that are busted, you know, help your homies out, you know, and that does matter, man. Having people in your neighborhood that are not on that trip, you know, someone they could call, you know, maybe pray for them, maybe help them out, talk to them, someone, you know, that's already been through that. That's important in the neighborhoods too, you know.
We got Isaac Pedroza, a.k.a. Sticks from Lomas. Thank you so much for coming, Isaac.
Thank you, bro. Thank you, bro, for having me.
It's an honor to have you, bro, because you've lived so much life, and it started with you jumping off the porch at age 9, man, and getting in the mix. Tell us about, you know, run us through the childhood real quick with the, you know, when did you first, you know, get put on Lomas?
Well, I mean, it started actually before that. You know, my childhood, I had that. I grew up in Boyle Heights till I was like 7, and I used to see it. You know, I used to see that I guess the culture, and I don't know, something inside resonated within me, and you know, I just, when I moved to Monterey Park, like around the age of 7, you know, it was a little different over there, but you would still see that kind of you know, the dress code and all that. And then I moved to Rosemead right around the age of 8. And then at 9, I remember I was in 4th grade. You know, I had a friend that was already kind of affiliated, and it was just childhood stuff. You know, we were just friends. And then it just evolved naturally. It wasn't something that was like the way it is now, like, oh, I want to do that, or you're influenced by the music. I didn't have none of that, you know. It was just there, you know. It was my life. So right. That's how it all started, you know. It wasn't like something that I looked at, you know. And I didn't have a father, so I guess there was a void there, and that kind of filled that void. And I know it's been like that for a lot of people, even people that have parents, both parents. There's still a void there sometimes. There's a lack of presence in the home, you know? So
you're looking for family, and you found it with the youth around you, right?
Yeah, I had a good family. I had a mother that loved me. I didn't have a father, but she always worked, my mother, and, you know, so there's something within a young boy, you know, in your adolescence that, you know, you need that. You know, you need somebody to tell you that you're doing good. You need somebody to encourage you. And when you don't have that, when you're growing up on the streets of Los Angeles, unfortunately, we're drawn into that, you know.
When did you officially get put on the Lomas roll call?
I remember perfectly because it was my birthday in 1990. I was 12 years old, and that was a day. But I was already backing up the neighborhood for like 3 years, you know, something like that. So it was just an official thing. But yeah, that day, my life for sure changed, you know, because that's all. That's pretty much, that was my whole life. You know, I cared about my family, I cared about everything else, but the neighborhood, that's all it was. And that's the way it still is for a lot of people, you know. It's a big decision, and you're, you know, fortunately, I'm still here to talk about it. But for a lot of people, it doesn't turn out that way.
But at 12, did you really know what you signed up for, bro?
Of course not, yeah. You don't know what you're signing up for. I mean, it's been said in the court system that, the brain's not even developed. There's already case law on it, and they're actually setting people free because there's people that did crimes before they were 25. So think about a 12-year-old. Think about an 11, a 12, 13, 14-year-old, you know, influenced by the streets, by the culture, you know, mentally, even spiritually, and we'll probably get into some of that. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on, agendas going on, you know, against people, you know, people of color especially, you know. So, you know, the point is that, you know, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of dynamics there's a lot of elements that people don't see, that people don't understand. You can't even comprehend it. I wouldn't even be able to, express it in words. You just have to go through it.
And during that time, movies like American Me, Blood In, Blood Out.
Yeah, I think they did have an influence. I remember I was a young kid, and I remember after it was finished, I felt a little, and it's ironic that I ended up, just kind of gravitating, to that and just going to prison. I started going to prison at a young age. So I think movies and music definitely have a heavy influence on the mind, on a young mind, especially in the hip hop culture and especially in Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's coming under criticism. A lot of people, the executives behind the money-making aspects of hip hop are being criticized for promoting serial killing, exploitation of women.
I think rightfully so. I think there's no, at this point, there's no line that they won't cross. You know what I'm saying? Back then, why were they criticizing Tupac? You know what I'm saying? Why were they trying to shut them down? Eazy-E, all them. And now, they found a way not just to exploit, but to infiltrate the hip hop culture and to infiltrate the streets. It's deep, man. It's deep. They go into the mind. If you could tap into the young mind, you could change everything, man. And there's a lot of things that people ain't aware of. Even sounds. The sound you can infiltrate somebody's, I guess, their whole being through a sound, through a color.
It's almost hypnotic, right?
It could be, it's hypnotic. Yeah. It's seducing. There's a lot of things that go into it,
So do you think that the gangster rap has poisoned the minds of black and brown kids in the inner cities?
So I'll be careful, I guess, with my words, because at the same time, it has also it was a voice of the streets that we didn't have. You know what I'm saying? And I love hip hop. I'm a hip hop baby, man. I love music. I make music myself, but I make music, for the streets, but to try to tap in a positive way, But to answer your question, yeah, of course, man. If we deny that, that would say that we're being ignorant. Of course, if you're putting something out there and it's affecting a young mind and they're out there gangbanging, they're playing with guns, you know what I'm saying? They can definitely be influenced to go do something evil. You know what I'm saying? But that's the way the streets, that's the nature of the beast,
100%. A lot of people will tell you, a lot of rappers that we've had on the show will say, we're merely reporting our circumstances.
Yeah, but they're also influencing. You got to take responsibility, you know what I mean? And be accountable. You can't just say, I'm doing this for a living, this and that, and speaking positive, saying that you're for the youth and for change. And I'm glad you brought this up, because that's something that I feel like, man, there's a lot of people, and shout out to them, they got gifts and talents, but I believe they're using them in the wrong way, and I believe God gave us talents, and you should use it to glorify Him, not to, poison the youth and poison the minds, man. If by the things you're saying, I do it, people, young kids get influenced by that. People look up to you, and if you're not careful, you don't know what you're doing. It's like selling drugs. When you sell drugs, you don't know how that drug's gonna affect that person and that family and that child and that dad and that mother. Like, you're not thinking about that.
When you were a youngster, man, did you feel the older homies were putting you on kamikaze missions, or
nah.
would they go on that same mission?
Well, I'm not gonna, disclose too much on that and speak on other people, but just generally speaking, the 80s and 90s, all over LA, it was cracking, and when you come into the gang lifestyle, of course, you get sucked into that, like I said, I can't really speak on that. Whatever I did in the lifestyle that I was living, I was making choices. They weren't always the right choices, but that's pretty much all I can say on that.
Do you remember being in a big melee, like out in public?
Man, I could tell you 1,000 stories, but yeah, I remember Alvera Street. That's probably the one I could remember. And we came out on KCal 9 on the news. We ran into the enemigos, and there was a bunch of them. I remember, and we were pretty outnumbered, but that happened regularly, man. At the mall, at the mall, you run into people. You go to the swap meet. You go to everywhere, Whittier Boulevard. You're always, back then it was different. I mean, it still happens, but not the way it happened back then.
Have you been caught slipping, as they say?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, especially at a young age. I remember one time, me and one of my homeboys were on a bike. I was on the handlebars, and we were crossing out the enemy. They had a road right there in my neighborhood, and we didn't have nothing to cross them out with. So I remember I crossed them out with some leaves. I grabbed a bunch of leaves. I just crossed them out, right? Jumped back on the handlebars. We're on San Gabriel and Garvey, for those that know where that's at. It used to be an empty lot after a Builders Square or something like that. It was an empty lot, and as we're driving, my enemies just came in a car and just, they were, I'm not gonna say the neighborhood and all that, but they just came, saying their neighborhood, and boom, they hit us, and they did like a donut. And I remember getting up, and I flew, like, I don't know how far I flew. And I remember getting up and looking, and they hit my homeboy was getting up, and they hit him again, like, boom, they ran him over, but he didn't fall. Like, they barely got his shoulder, and then they were gone, And that was, if they would have got off, if they were, they were strapped, whatever, they could have easily got us. That's an extreme one. That's not getting jumped, but yeah, I mean, growing up, you go through all that,
There's no backing down. There's no retreat. Or that would spread through the neighborhood, correct?
Well, it's more like a pride issue. As a human being, we all have pride, but as a gang member, that pride increases by like times 10 or something, and so it's all about your reputation, and as a young kid, you wanna be the biggest and baddest, and not everybody, but that's just how it is, man. That's a natural, even like in sports, it's the same thing. You want to be the best. And so if you're in the gang life, it's the same thing. You're on a team, and you want to do your part,
So when you were 16, you were on Charlie Road, right, at LA Men's Central?
I was everywhere. I was in 9500. This was in 1994. So I was in, everywhere. This was when it was cracking, 9500, 2000 floor, 3000, 4000, Supermax, Wayside, Medium North. I was raised in the county, man, You're in your 40s now, and, they call you Sticks because you were a skinny dude, right? Yeah, I'm pretty big now, but back then I was.
Right, yeah. So I could only imagine you at 16 showing up at county.
Yeah. And back then, it seemed like all the homies, like, it was different. Like, all the older homies, they were actually looking like older homies, like big old mustaches, and the old tattoos with the peacock and the spider webs, That's how it was. But I thank God that I went through that, bro, because it became a part of me. I picked up on everything. I soaked everything up. All the homies that, that passed on whatever schooling they had, I'm glad I went through it in that era,
Was there one particular OG that put into you, that laced you up with the game, that is there someone that comes to mind? I know.
Dang, man, there's so many. I would say off the top, Blackbird from Duarte, Leonard from Whitefins, from Eastside Whitefins, from the Hole. Man, there's so many, man. Snake from Pacas, from the projects. There's a lot, man. There's a lot of dudes that, shout out to them. If I didn't name you, like, that really genuinely cared. Like, they would see me like, man, there's a young dude, young little kid, and I held my own. I did. I was always, I was small, so I always had to have a weapon, stuff like that, just like in the streets. But, I'm very grateful for everybody that's been a part of my growth, my development. whatever you want to call it.
What was some of the advice that stayed in between your two ears, bro?
The best advice I ever got is to be real and to just don't try to be something you're not. You don't got to add extras. If you could just be you, people will love you and accept you for you. You don't want someone to love you and respect you for something you're not. Now, as far as the other stuff, you know what I mean? Like, that's something else. But, when it comes to just being a man, that's the best advice I remember always getting, man. Like, and stay away from the BS, you know what I mean? Of course, stay away from the politics, all that. But,
your come to Jesus moment, the moment in your life, your Damascus Road moment where you're like, man, this is real in the field. You're facing life and murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you represented yourself pro per, meaning you didn't hire a public pretender.
Nah.
You didn't have the funds to get a big high-powered attorney.
That's kind of a long story. What up? This is Isaac Pedroza, a.k.a. Sticks from Lomas, and you tapped in with CINEMILLS TV. He never showed up for my first court date. I had to fire him. My family, they got me, my mom, she got me a paid attorney. And then the money ran out and she started turning on me. And then once that happened...
Who started turning on you, the attorney?
Yeah, her name is... Don't go to her. But yeah, my ex-attorney, she was cool, but it seemed like the DA, the prosecution probably got to her somehow, some way. And then the money was running out. We had a plan and a strategy, and then it all changed from one day to the next, and I kind of noticed it. I sensed it, and I kind of peeped game on her whole demeanor. And so I had fired her, and I went pro per. I had no choice but to go pro per. And I represented myself for 3.5 years. I had to study case law. I used to read books. I used to stay up all night, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. I put in a lot of work. But ultimately, it was the Lord, bro, that gave me the strength, the wisdom, like do this, do that. There's so many stories I could tell you of his direction, like where I would have went right. He told me to go this way, like, you know what I'm saying? Or left, and he told me to go right, like, and it was I had nowhere to turn, bro. Like when you're fighting for your life, you could, there's different options. And the way I seen it, I had nowhere else to turn, and I turned to God. I didn't become Christian when I was in jail. I was still Sticks from Lomas, and I was still me, man. I was still, heavily, participating in everything, man. But I already had a relationship with God. I already had, promises that God had given me. I already felt His presence in my life. I used to pray about situations. I got out of courtrooms. I got out of a courtroom that is very hard to get out of a courtroom, and He made a way, man, where I had to file a motion, and they were violating my rights in there, And for those watching, there's, you can look me up there. I've said the story many times on many platforms, but that's pretty much, I've been through a lot of stuff, man. In the case, I had to go to a different judge. I used to be in Pasadena court, and then they took me from Pasadena court to CCB court through some extraordinary circumstances because of security, because of my co-defendant. And when we went to trial, they weren't going to be able to accommodate the security, so they had to move us to CCB court. That ended up being a blessing. If I would have stayed in Pasadena, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, man. So everything that turned out for the best. I had an attorney I interviewed all the attorneys that you could name here in LA, like the big names: Alex Kessel, Bill Pittman, Andrew Flyer. And I didn't have no money, man. I was walking by faith. I was like, when the time comes, God's gonna provide. And I ended up getting Alex Kessel, and we went to trial. I handed him all the work. I put in a lot of work, man. I had a private investigator. I handed him all the work. I said, here, here's what I did, and here's what you need to prepare for trial. We prepared for trial, and we went to trial, man, and we ended up losing. They didn't have no evidence against me. They had one dude that said that I did it, 10 years later, you know what I'm saying? And but it was a high profile case. So, they pretty much, they wanted me, man. They wanted everybody they could get on this case. And there's people that got found guilty on this case. One of my other co-defendants, rest in peace, he got found. He got a 9 not guilty hung jury. A 9 not guilty. That's pretty hard, man. And for the high profile case, everything they were throwing on him, it was crazy, you know. And so it was a weak case, you know. But at the same time, I thank God that I went through that whole experience, man, because that's where God got a hold of my heart. That's where I turned to him and I said, you know what, Lord, if you get me out of this, like, I want to live for you. You know, I want to do what you created me to do. I don't want to be out here doing what I was doing, you know, like, I don't want to be like, hey, look what I did. Nah, look what God did. You know, look what God did. I just want to be here and tell you about how good he is and that he forgives sins, even the worst of sins. The worst of sins. Jesus Christ came to forgive the worst of sins. He made a way for people like me and people like you, everybody that's even you doing an interview, each and every person alive. Jesus came for you personally, not just for all you in general. He came for you specifically, you know?
So just for people to know, in the judicial system, when you get a state appointed attorney, they're oftentimes more concerned with their relationship with the DA, you know, and not so much their client.
That's a good point,
right?
yeah. That's a good point.
They want to have a survivable relationship with that DA and be
there all the time.
They're all
year in, year out, yeah.
And that's a problem with our judicial system because Sticks is going to come and go, but I'm going to see that DA for the rest of my career. So there's that. And then also for those that don't live in the LA area, Pasadena is predominantly a very white Anglo-Saxon Protestant kind of community. So the juror pool would look at you as a brown man and hang you, you know, and bury you under the jail. So getting that transfer.
And the culture within that court, every court has specific, like back then they used to be like Norwalk, they used to call it. Right. You had Compton, you had, you know,
Ice
a lot
Cube
of different...
used to say, "Don't catch a case in Torrance." You know, the Torrance PD.
Ooh, Torrance was vicious. San Fernando, like there's a bunch of courts. Pomona, there's a lot of courts that you ain't gonna get no love. CCB, you got some action. You know,
LA County is run by the Sheriff's Department, but there are lots of cities outside of LA City that have their own little police departments, and these departments are good old boys, you know,
like the city of San Gabriel, Pasadena.
And they run their own little program, and you know, a lot of foul things have occurred over the years, specifically planting dope, dropping you off in an enemy hood and letting you walk home. They do a lot of janky things like that.
Yeah, but real quick, what you said about the culture, the attorneys being there all the time, they're basically there all day, year in, year out. And there's a lot of things that go on in the background, but just in defense of the judicial system, it worked for me because we'll probably get to that. You know, it helped me. The judge, she ruled against the law, she ruled in accordance with the law and not on her own emotions and what she believed was good or true. But that's why I do thank God that I live in America. I'll tell you that much.
So Sticks, you get convicted for murder, bro. You're going to be washed out for life, man, right? And the trial gets appealed.
Yeah, it was a motion for a new trial. And what we were asking the judge is to look at what they used to convict me, which was nothing. They were influenced pretty much by, you know, I was a gang member, tattoos and all that. But as far as evidence, they had none, you know. And so the judge, she looked at everything and she agreed with our motion. And she said, in 24 years on the bench, I've never granted a new trial. Alex Kessel was my trial attorney, and now we were waiting for a new trial. But during that time, he found a case law, Hudson versus Louisiana, a 1981 case. I think it was a kind of a similar circumstances. It was a brother, a black guy from Louisiana, and they couldn't retry him based on the double jeopardy clause of the U.S. Constitution, and that right there set me free, man. I remember Alex, I called him and I remember he was all happy and he's like, man, he goes, "You're going home, dude, you're going home." I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And he's like, "Yeah, I found a case law He goes, they can't take you to trial. He goes, it would be violating the U.S. Constitution under double jeopardy. And I didn't understand it, but he filed the motion, and then he came to visit me, and he made it a little bit more clear. And we went. We had a hearing on March 15th of 2013, and I remember praying that day. And I remember that day, my DA, he couldn't even talk. Like, he couldn't even talk, man. And it was, everything was in my favor. Everything was in my favor. It was all lined up. I believe I was predestined for that day to come home. And the judge, she said, you know, I have to follow the U.S. Constitution. I cannot take this man to trial with the same evidence that I used that the prosecution used in the other trial. And so I have to set this man free. And she dismissed the case, and I walked. Wow. I walked away that day.
And for those listening, in LA County, that is about as rare as winning the lottery. You never went on appeal, bro.
Never.
And that Hudson versus Louisiana, that Kessel pulled out of a hat, man, really gave you a second chance at life. Did you make a deal with God at that point? Did you say, God, if you let me free, man, I'm all yours?
Man, I wouldn't say a deal, but I did, you know, tell the Lord that, you know what, man, you know, and I did this many times. A lot of you guys know that when you're in trouble, you know, you get shot, you know, you always cry out to God, man. If any of you guys listening right now, you know, God forbid, if you were to get hit with some bullets and you're laying on that ground, your number one instinct is to cry out to the one that made you, man, your creator, which is God. And so I did. I told God, I was like, Lord, you know, if you get me out of this, I promise, man, I'll be a vessel for you. And that's what I'm trying to do here, you know. You know, I come on these platforms, you know, of course, with an intention and a mission, you know, to share what I've been through. You know, I don't mind talking about the gang life and what I've been through, because that's part of who I am and my testimony. But ultimately, it's to reach even one person, and I might not reach them in a big way, but if I could just make them think, that's good enough for me, you know. And so, you know, that's ultimately that's what it's all about, you know.
I'm in the late 80s. I teleport back to late 80s, and I see young Isaac, aka Sticks, on the porch, bro. 12 years old. He's starting to wear the socks up to his knees, the Dickies. What do I say to that young man? What do I tell him, man?
I love my neighborhood. Everybody knows, you know, I love my homeboys, and that's gonna always be a part of me. I'm still in a lot of their lives, and I probably wouldn't change it because I am who I am. But I would probably tell myself not to make that decision, because it came with a lot of hurt and pain, man. And I'm only here by God's grace, you know. And what I mean by that is a lot of my homeboys, a lot of the people I grew up with, they're no longer here. There's no future in it, you know what I mean? Why would you want to choose something that's going to put you in a place that you don't want to be, you know, potentially in doing life, dead, all for pride? Someone walks up to you, where you from? Whoop-de-whoop, boom, blow your head off. That's it. You're done. Like, why would you want to do that willingly?
And the guy the guy that you're about to shoot or is shooting at you looks just like you.
Yeah. He looks just like you.
He dresses like you, right?
Yeah, and
he was raised by the same type of environment as you, but that's the same guy who's going to give you a soup in prison, right?
Yeah, when you mature too, you start to realize that, like you just said, it's the dude you're looking for looks just like you. And I'll mention this, and I think people have mentioned it before, but Nipsey Hussle, rest in peace, he said, you know, when you out there, you know, you're looking for the enemy, you're looking for yourself. You're looking for the dude that's active. That's who you want to catch, right? And that's you. You're actually looking for you. He just grew up in a different city. You know what I'm saying? And when you grow up, you start to mature, and you start to, like you said, you spend time with your enemy. You know, I've had my worst enemies as my cellies. And one of my favorite dudes, you know, in this earth is my enemy. Like that, one of those guys, one of the best guys that I've met in my whole life, he happens to be my enemy, because I got to know the real him. And it was beyond the neighborhood and all that. Like, this dude was a solid dude, you know, and that's just reality. That's just reality. I understand the whole dynamics. Like, you grow up in the gang culture, that's the enemy. There's no turning from that. You know, it's not as easy as it seems that you could just stop that. So I understand all that, you know. But if you have the opportunity, if you have a chance, and you could still be from your neighborhood, you know, you could still do you could still do good. Get a job, you know what I mean? Be responsible, and you could be a good presence in your neighborhood. Look out for your homies that are busted, you know, help your homies out, you know, and you know, so yeah, I'm not trying to tell people like, hey, just, you know, cause like I said, I'm still who I am, and that does matter, man. Having people in your neighborhood that are not on that trip, you know, someone they could call, you know, maybe pray for them, maybe help them out, talk to them, someone, you know, that's already been through that. That's important in the neighborhoods too, you know.
But Sticks, when you talk about killing someone that looks like yourself and vice versa, do you feel that the bigger, the deeper layer beyond that is you don't like the person you see in the mirror, that you're actually trying to kill off? That the negative is really the enemy, the one that lives inside us?
That's a good point. Your nature, your sin nature, you're gonna automatically, you know, and so you're in that environment, you're gonna lash out in that way, and so that's a good point. You know, us as human beings, we have so much inside of us, and there's no outlet. There's no outlet, and a lot of that stuff, it builds up inside. And if you're gangbanging, of course, you're gonna express that in that way. You know, you're gonna try to hurt people, but in reality, you're only hurting yourself. And I'll give a quick example. When I was living like that, there was points where I would be depressed. I would be so out of touch with reality. You know what I'm saying? I would be so far gone. Just active gangbang, all that stuff, and there's no way to express that with words. That's why I thank God for God. You know what I mean? Like, there's somewhere where I could release that to, and I could be forgiven, and I don't have to carry that in my conscience. That's why God is important to people like me. That's why I do what I do, because that's the answer. At the end of the day, the best answer that I could give you, the best advice I give you, go to God. He's the one. He's the only one that has the answer. I don't got the answers. I still, you know what I mean? Don't look at me. Look at him, you know?
You know, that's really well put. And, you know, I want our audience to know you're not a dropout. You're by any means. You're just a man who loves his neighborhood, and you love God and your family, and you stand for what you believe in. And we appreciate you sharing your story with us, man. We really do. And your time. Thank you so much, Isaac, for shooting through today.
Amen. God bless you, man.
All right, bro.
Salute.